I speak to you as one of the 1 in 4 women in America who have had an abortion. And for you to understand how I ultimately decided to have an abortion, I have to start earlier with the birth of my first child, Janak. Janak was born at 26 and a half weeks. Janak was so small, they fit in the palm of my hand, the size of a medium-sized squash. For 3 months, we did not know if Janak would live or die. They needed multiple blood transfusions, had to be fed drop by drop, and constantly had their heart stop and start. The fact that Janak is a 25-year-old beautiful human being is a true miracle and the greatest gift in my life. As a new mom taking care of a very sick baby and recovering from major surgery myself, I was struggling. My marriage did not survive. We split custody of Janak, and I was a part-time single parent. Shortly after, I met a wonderful man who is my husband today. I knew I was not ready to have another child, so I religiously took my daily contraceptive pill. Despite that, I became pregnant. I consulted with my doctors who told me that any future pregnancy would likely also be high risk to me and the child, similar to what I had gone through with Janak. I very much wanted to have more children, but I simply could not imagine going through that again. After discussions with my partner, who was completely supportive of whatever choice I made, I decided to have an abortion. 2 decades later, I think about those moments on the table in the doctor's office, a doctor who was kind and compassionate and skilled, performing abortions in a state that recognizes a person's constitutional right to make their choices about their reproductive care. For me, terminating my pregnancy was not an easy choice, the most difficult I've made in my life, but it was my choice, and that is what must be preserved for every pregnant person.
Today I share for the first time publicly a very difficult personal story, hoping that it will help destigmatize accessing abortion care. But I'm compelled to speak out because of the real risks of the clock being turned back to those days before Roe versus Wade, to the days when I was a teenager and had a back alley abortion in Mexico. I was raised in El Paso, Texas, and attended Catholic school, so of course, growing up, sex education was non-existent. Adolescent, sexual, and reproductive health were not discussed in a meaningful way, and because of that, I honestly wasn't sure how you got pregnant. Now, after grammar school, we moved to California, and later, when I just turned 16, I missed my period. I was confused, afraid, and unsure, not knowing if I was pregnant or not. I didn't know what to do. Now, in those days, mind you, this is in the mid-1960s, women and girls were told if you didn't have a period, you should take quinine pills, sit in a tub of water, or use a coat hanger if nothing else worked. My mother noticed I became introverted and very quiet, so she asked me what was going on with me. At that point, I told her everything. I told her that I maybe not could be pregnant. She responded with love. She was supportive and sympathetic and took me to the doctor who confirmed I was pregnant. Now, my mother asked me if I wanted to get an abortion. She didn't demand or force me, but understood that this was my personal decision and a choice that I needed to make, and she would support me regardless. So once I made this decision prayerfully, one of my mother's best friends in El Paso helped me access the abortion I could not get in California. When my mother told her what was going on, she told my mother to send me to her in El Paso because she knew of a good, competent, and compassionate doctor, yes, who had a back alley clinic in Mexico. Now, I was one of the lucky ones, Madam Chair. A lot of girls and women in my generation didn't make it. They died from unsafe abortions. In the 1960s, unsafe septic abortions were the primary killer of African-American women.
Shortly after graduating, I went on a church trip to Jackson, Mississippi. I had many friends on that trip, and while there, I met a boy, a friend of a friend. He was a little older than I was, about maybe 20 years old. That first day we met, we flirted, we talked on the phone. While on the phone, he asked me, could he come over to my room? I answered the door and quietly told him he could come in, imagining that we would talk and laugh like we had done over the phone. But the next thing I knew, he was on top of me. When he was done, he got up, he pulled up his pants, and without a word, he left. That was it. I was confused, I was embarrassed, I was ashamed. I asked myself, was it something that I had done? About a month after the trip, I turned 18. A few weeks later, I realized I had missed my period. I reached out to a friend and asked the guy from the church trip to contact me. I waited for him to reach out, but he never did. I never heard from him. I was 18, I was broke, and I felt so alone. I blamed myself for what had happened to me. But I knew I had options. I had known other girls who had gone to a local clinic to get birth control and some who had gotten abortions. So I looked through the yellow pages and scheduled an appointment. During my first visit, I found out that I was 9 weeks pregnant, and then the panic set in. How could I make this pregnancy work? How could I, at 18 years old and barely scraping by, support a child on my own? And I would have been on my own. I was stressed out knowing that the father wouldn't be involved and that I feared my parents would kick me out of the home, the best parents in the world, but I feared they would kick me out. My dad was a proud father and always bragging about his little girl and how he knew I would go straight to college and become attorney general. That was his goal for me. Choosing to have an abortion was the hardest decision I had ever made. But at 18 years old, I knew it was the right decision for me. It was freeing, knowing I had options. So to all the black women and girls who have had abortions and will have abortions, we have nothing to be ashamed of. We live in a society that has failed to legislate love and justice for us. So we deserve better. We demand better. We are worthy of better. So that's why I'm here to tell my story. So today, I sit before you as that nurse, as that pastor, as that activist, that survivor, that single mom, that congresswoman to testify that in the summer of 1994, I was raped, I became pregnant, and I chose to have an abortion.